Hello and welcome to Dos Gatos Forge. Today we're going to be talking about how I finish off a raised pin in a knife handle. And it can be either a single pin in a hidden tang, kind of like this one, or it could be many different pins in a frame handle, or even in a full tang handle like this one. I'm going to see if I can get a kind of a close-up picture of these to look at. So I'm going to talk about how I put these pins in, and then how I finish off the top. They're a little raised up off of the surface, but they're all domed and they're all polished smooth. So we're gonna go through the steps and we're gonna cover that. Let me see if I can get a close-up of these for you. Okay, so these are the pins in the frame handle. And you can see they're all kind of raised. They sit up above the surface, but they're all highly polished, smoothed off, and rounded. And the same in the partial tang handle with the one retaining pin. And I finish these both off the same way using the same exact technique. And so let's get to it. So today we're going to work on peening the pins down on the frame handle. So I've got my little pin peening jig that I built. I think I got this idea from Nick Wheeler. I think this is based on his design. And it's basically a clamp that's meant to hold the blade between these two pieces of steel that have a rubber backing, and your blade goes in there with a protective sheath on it and gets clamped down with the wing nuts. And then once you have that clamped in place, I'm not going to put it in there for demonstration purposes, you have the anvil, which in my case is a piece of 1.5 inch square solid that's been drilled to allow this stainless steel bolt to screw into it. And I've welded an accompanying nut there and put a double nut on there. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to raise this anvil up so that this domed head, I ground this down and polished it on the buffer, is right up against the bottom of the pin you're going to be working on. And once you get it up there nice and tight, you can tighten this down and lock it in place so it won't go anywhere. And that's the pin working jig. Nobody sells these commercially as far as I know, so you have to make one yourself. Mine is made out of 3/8 plate, and then I welded it all up together. But this little clamping action here will hold the blade very secure and hold your whole knife very secure while you're working on it. So get yourself, I don't know if those of you who have welders in your shop, I mean, most of us have a MIG welder of some sort or another in our shop, if for nothing else for doing Damascus billets. But so that's how that works, you know. And you can take this and you can tighten it up, move it down, get it right underneath that pin. This is harder to do when I'm keeping it tipped for the camera, but push it right up against that pin you're going to work on, and then tighten this down and keep that pin right in the center, and that will keep this from flexing on you while you're working on that pin. Okay, so the first step in pinning the pins down is to get your knife situated, get it supported well so that whatever you're doing isn't flexing the knife, causing you some problems. So it's all tightened up in the jig. And the first thing is to get all your pins the same height. You want the same amount of material above the handle material, the same amount of pin, in order to make sure that everything ends up being uniform after you're done peening them down. People have asked me, how do you get them all the same size? And the problem is that if you start with more material on this one than you do on this one, when you get done peening this one, it's going to be a lot bigger than this one is, and it's not going to look right. So we have to cut these down, and I just like to protect this. I just take some blue painter's tape. I just push it over the pins for this one, this process right here. Poke those through, get it down. Make sure everything is covering the ivory that we're going to work on. And then I just take a regular pair of dikes. Now, this pair of dikes is going to cut off the pin, and it's going to leave a certain amount, and it's going to have a little dip up at the top. I don't really care because I'm going to file them all down in a minute. So I'm just going to cut these pins off. These pins are glued in, so they're not going to move on you. They're all epoxied into place. I'm going to start off by just taking off this little piece of pin material on all the pins. Put them all down. And if you've managed to get a pin and you can't actually cut anything off on it, well, that means you messed up in the beginning, and you may or may not have enough pin to match all the other ones. But these are 16th inch pins, and I do them pretty darn small. And so I take right now we've got the blue tape, and the blue tape is approximately, let's get that set. The blue tape is approximately 3.5 thousandths thick. And I take a 1/32 inch drill bit and my file, and I lay that. If you don't have a 32nd inch, go buy a decimal equivalent, I think, or a number equivalent. The number equivalent is somewhere around like a 66 to a 68, somewhere in that vicinity, and you'll get about a 32nd of an inch drill bit. And I'm just going to rough that down flat. Careful you don't run your file into your guard or any other fittings. And I'm just using that drill bit as a guide, and when I get down to the drill bit, and you can feel it, you can definitely feel you get down there. I'm just going to flatten that head out. Just going to flatten it out at about a 32nd of an inch plus the 3.5 thousandths for the tape above the surface of the ivory. And this way you've got the same amount of material sticking above the ivory, or whatever your handle scale material is. And you just do each and every pin this way, using that file as a guide. I mean that drill bit as a guide. You file down to the drill bit. Very number 4 file for your final couple there. And when you feel that, try to skating across that drill bit, you know you're down where you want to be. The drill bit is hard enough that this file isn't going to really touch it. It's not really going to make it. You know, it's not going to make it into that drill bit any and reduce the size over time. I mean, it's just not there. You buy a good quality drill bit, buy something like a cobalt drill bit, or even a high-speed steel drill bit will suffice. And when you get down and you feel it start to skate across that drill bit, you know you're done. Do all the pins. Do all of them, both sides of the knife, and move on to the next step. I've got all the pins filed down and smoothed off. We're going to start to peen them, and you got a couple of things you're going to need to have. This is a set of nail sets, Stanley nail sets. You can buy these at Home Depot or Lowe's or any woodworking store or anything like that. And as you can see, I have ground down and smoothed off and then buffed to a high polish at the ends, so they are mostly rounded, slightly pointed. I use a ball peen hammer, a small ball peen hammer. You can use a chasing hammer if you like, or whatever. This is a sheet of acetate. Basically, it's the same thing as transparency paper for your printer, but it measures a 1/2,000th thickness. And there's some blue painter's tape. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your leather punch, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my leather punch and I'm going to make some holes in the acetate that will just fit around the pin in the handle. And then I'm going to cut these out so I can use them to kind of protect the handle material while I'm peening these pins down, because I do not want to hit the handle material with the punch. So I've taken my anvil and I'm going to snug it up so that the top center of the anvil is directly underneath this pin right here. I'm going to push it up just a tiny bit. And I'm going to tighten it down so it won't move. So now that's fully supported. And I can take my piece of acetate and I can lay it over the pin. And I can tape it down tight with some blue painter's tape. Now the first step is going to be just to squash that pin head down until it contacts or goes into that acetate. And I'm going to use the ball peen of the hammer, the ball part, and I'm just going to tap it. And I can see that I've started to spread it out a little. Now that I've spread it out a little, I'm going to take my largest pin tool. I'm going to use my pinky to hold it right where I want it. I'm going to put it kind of in the center of that pin. I'm going to start tapping it. I'm going to start moving that, spreading that pin out. And your pinky keeps that from moving away. Now you're going to need to rotate this around so you can work around that pin. And start to push it down. And when you get it spread out enough, downsize to the next size and start working around the outside. and pushing the outside out. Now these are very light taps. This is not wailing on it with your hammer. This is just soft tapping. These are nickel silver pins, by the way, and they are pretty soft. I anneal them, rotate so you can work all around the whole thing. You can work that whole area. And this is one of those cases where a nice pair of magnifiers or optivisors really helps. You can really get a good look at what it looks like and where it needs to go. Start moving the pin down in the direction you want it to go in. Start working around the whole outside of it. Now if we look at it real close, you can see how much larger this pin has gotten compared to this one over here that I haven't worked on yet. And you can see that it's domed out, spread out over that acetate, and you'll know that you're down to the acetate by trying to pick the acetate up. You know, if you try to pick it up and it's caught underneath there, you know you are down to the acetate, if not through it. Okay, so on to the next step. All these pins have been partially domed down in the first step here. And if you remember, we domed them down till they contacted and pressed in a little bit these little pieces of acetate. So there's still a 5/1000ths, because this is 5/1000ths, right, gap between the scale material and the lip. And you can feel that. You can definitely feel it with your fingertip. You can feel that sharp edge there. So now we got to get rid of that. So we're going to take our little pieces of acetate and we're going to cut a slightly larger hole in it. All right, we're going to go in there and we're going to make that hole a little bigger so that it fits over around the outside of that. And we're going to tape those back down on there. We're going to move our anvil. Now, I didn't stress this in the first part, but you need to move the anvil every time you change to a new pin, okay? That anvil should always be supporting the pin that you're working on. So every time you move to a new pin, you got to move the anvil. And you got to reset it. We got our little piece of acetate. I'm going to center the pin on the hole, tape it down. And we're going to use that fine point. Just going to go around the outside edge of that pin and we're just going to tuck that down inside the hole. Okay, so I have one side done, and I just wanted to show you so that you can see the difference between the side that's been peened over and the side that is still straight. And you can really tell the difference of what it is that's happened. These pins have been widened out, domed over, and they're still pretty rough. They've got a lot of facets to them, and we'll get to polishing those smooth in the next step or two. But right now I've got to get this other side domed over before we can get to the next step. For polishing the pins, I use these little rubberized abrasive stick polishers. They're actually called pin polishers. I buy these from Rio Grande. They come in a variety of different grits. It's a rubberized abrasive, much like a Kratex wheel. It goes in its own little holder in a rotary tool, like a Dremel tool or a Fordham tool. And I do a 3-step or sometimes a 2-step polish with a medium to take out all of the rough spots on the pin, and then a finer one to really smooth it out, and then sometimes even finer one to really polish it to a shine. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to buff this with a green chrome anyway after I'm all done to really get them shiny. So that's the polishing tool. It goes into this little holder in your rotary tool. And I prefer to do this polishing function with the knife in my hand, so I can really take a look at it and see what I'm doing. It's kind of difficult. I like to have my optivisors on when I'm doing this, and the optivisors get in the way of the camera, but I'm going to give it a try. Going to go around the base. And the acetate is going to help protect the scale from the abrasives in the polishing pin. I've got a foot control that helps me control the speed. And right now I'm just using a medium grit to kind of try to take off the lumps. Try to take out the divots. Try to kind of flatten out the surface on the top. I don't know if you can see that, but it's now much smoother, and the edges are trimmed down and flattened out. Now I'm going to change to a different grit. I'm going to go to a slightly finer grit, and I'm going to trim that off square. Pop that in there. And by the end of this grit, you should have all your surface areas flattened out, or smoothed over anyway. You shouldn't really have any divots left in that pin head. I'm working around it and over the top of it. And that finishes off that pin. I mean, that's a pretty nice finish right there. I can go to a third finer grit, and then I can take it to the buffing wheel after all the pins are done. But that's basically what it is, man. You've gotten down to that point. You've got a nice domed head. It's smooth, it's shiny, it's polished, it's done. And you can fuss with it a little bit more if you really want, or you can just leave it like this. Well, that's it. That's my technique for how I do raised and finished dome top pins in a knife handle. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it gives you something to progress towards. And I hope if you use it that it helps you up your game. Till next time, this is Josh from Dos Gatos Forge. Keep grinding.